Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. My name is Ciara O'Sullivan and I work at Century Tech as an International Schools Manager. We're running this webinar as part of a series in which we speak to various school leaders around the world who can share best practice and their valuable insights into working in different school settings. I'm delighted today to be joined by Jonathan Gunzi, who's Head of Secondary at Hastings School in Madrid. Hastings are part of the Cognita Group, which is a large group of international schools, now almost 80 schools, I believe, around the world. And we're really privileged to have Jonathan here with us today to share his insights. Before I hand over to Jonathan to give a little introduction about himself, the topic in which we're going to be discussing today is managing change, specifically around technology. And I think we can all agree that schools have had to manage and adapt so quickly over the past couple of months with the challenges that coronavirus has brought to them. So today we're going to be gaining some of Jonathan's experience in how he did that. So yeah, before we get stuck in, Jonathan, and I'll ask you some questions, are you okay just to introduce yourself, to tell us a little bit more about your role at Hastings?
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my name is Jonathan. I'm the head of secondary at Hastings School. And yes, it's been my first year there. And I think one of the main reasons, or one of the big parts of my interview, was bringing us into this fourth industrial revolution, which then, of course, happened at a very quick pace this year. Before that, I was working in London, and I was working in 4 different secondary state schools before here. And one of the things we did in my previous school was to work on launching the one-to-one devices, which I then just missed because of this opportunity of becoming head of secondary in Madrid at Hastings School.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And I know Hastings have now broken up for summer, and hopefully you're getting finally some well-deserved rest after what's been, I can imagine, quite a stressful couple of months. So just, I suppose it's quite a good time, I guess, to look back and reflect on what's happened over those couple of months and the massive amount of changes that you've had to make at school level. So if we go back, I guess, pre sort of lockdown, can we talk a little bit about the context of the school and sort of the technology that was being used at Hastings before, as you say, you went into that sort of new industrial revolution that did happen?
Yeah, so there was a little bit going on. So what I tried to do was to try and start using one-to-one devices in classes. So we had 2 laptop trolleys in one building, and we had, iPad trolleys in one building. We had some laptop trolleys in the other building, but the laptops were quite slow. It didn't work as well as we wanted it to, but we started using Teams, or we tried to start using Teams earlier in the year. I think it was about November, December time, and that's mainly it, really. So there wasn't a huge amount of usage. There were some artificial intelligence platforms we were using, mainly in math and a little bit in science as well. But that was pretty much it before March.
Okay, great. And then I suppose gearing up to March, and what all of us saw in the media was how quickly Spain did have to lock down. You had those surge cases quite early on. So can you talk us through how you, I guess, went from using some technology, as you said, at school level, to really going almost virtually online very quickly?
Well, in Madrid, it all happened even faster than the rest of Spain, because in Madrid, we were told on a Monday evening, I think it was the 11th of March, that we were going to close on the 13th of March. So we literally had Monday evening, although school had already broken up by then, and then we had Tuesday to get ready, and then Wednesday, the students weren't going to come into school anymore. So it happened really quickly. So I think the most important thing was to make the most of the little time that we had and immediately communicate with parents that we would have assemblies, that we would have, Microsoft as our main platform. I made sure that there was a user guide ready for Tuesday for parents, teachers and students. It was actually very similar for all 3 groups. And we were frantically trying to generate teams through Sims from then on. So that ran overnight and was just about finished on that Tuesday evening, I think. And on the day, my IT coordinator and myself, we ran assemblies, 45 minutes per year group. And we showed them, I mean, the younger ones had seen it before, but hadn't used it that successfully. There were worries about passwords mainly. So we did 45 minutes on each one, how to use it. We recorded the assemblies, put that in Teams, and then they had access there. We also encouraged parents to attend those if they could. Then we sent the students home, said goodbye, and hopefully see you in a few weeks, which didn't really happen. And then we trained the teachers in the evening. But teachers had already used it as a platform for sharing resources among staff, but had rarely used it with students before. 1 or 2 teachers had in some sixth form classes, but not that many. So we did one training session on that Tuesday. Then on the Wednesday, we did ask staff, although the students weren't here, to come back for that one day so they could start teaching, doing their online teaching in school and see if any support was needed. And then we had one final meeting that evening. But then we said to staff after that, well, school will be open if you want it to be. But then the next week we were told anyway, it wasn't allowed to be open anymore. So that really pretty much from day one, it started, and the online lessons continued with a normal timetable. All we did was we reduced the amount of tutor time in the morning from 5 to 3. We had a fixed assembly slot on the Wednesday, and we took one lengua class to do a little bit more PE to keep that movement going. But that's all we changed, and otherwise we had a normal curriculum. And I suppose that the other thing that was really important was the help desk. So we set up a specific help desk for parents, which was used, tremendously at the beginning. And our IT staff were great at responding very quickly. So that was it, and then it worked.
And it worked, yeah. And it's quite fascinating to listen to all of those support mechanisms that you put in place really quickly, to support, your staff, as you said, your students with the assemblies, and then your parents as well, and the importance of that. And I suppose there was the benefit to some degree with Teams that you had used it to some capacity ahead of lockdown. But of course today, how we've come together is that you've launched with Century, which has been amazing, and a fantastic opportunity for us that we've got to bring our technology to Spain. Jonathan, how was that introducing something completely new that staff wouldn't have seen before, and how did that go for you?
Well, that really went the other way around, and maybe that's part of its success, is that we really introduced it to students first and only later to teachers. So we were just running it towards 2 weeks before the holidays, and because the Madrid lockdown was so intensive, and students, our students weren't even allowed out on the street. So the parents were a bit worried that after a full curriculum, what would they do with them all day long during the 2 weeks of holiday? And I was also keen to make sure that our staff, who have been working really hard, did get a 2-week holiday and did not feel they needed to start working or cut down their holidays in any way. So what I did, I really started communicating with parents a few weeks in advance, and I said, this is coming, this is what it is. I emailed them the Century Tech link as well, so they can have a look in advance, and I said you'll get more details as we get nearer. Then 2 days before the launch assemblies, I emailed them again, and I said, these are the launch assemblies, please feel free to join. And I think more people joined for that one, more parents joined for those. I had a little bit of feedback from them. And again, we recorded those assemblies. But what we did differently, I suppose, was that we really took a long time to introduce the students to it. So we did, because this was new, they had definitely not seen this before. So we had 1 hour assembly on just Century Tech in general, what it was. And I think we started with English. And then we asked them to complete, we gave them 15 minutes within that hour to go away, log in, because the login credentials were the same as the Microsoft ones, to log in and then come back to fill in a form to tell us that everything was all right and that they managed to log in properly. And then we did the same the next day for each year group, again 1 hour, and then we asked them to go and explore math and science, and again get back to us if there were any problems. And then between the two of us, again, ICT technician and myself, head of IT and myself, we managed to, through the chat, quite quickly respond to any problems there. So the students had no excuse really. And I was also quite strict with the students. And I said, I'm expecting you to do 2 hours a day. It was 2 hours for all of them a day. And it was much easier for the parents then to say to their child, well, look, you're expected to do this. It's not just some sort of reading list recommendation. So that made it a lot easier. And then the students took really well to it. Their parents were very encouraging. They were really impressed with the platform. and therefore having the parents on board during the holidays made that we had a huge amount of uptake, nuggets completed, and questions answered during those first 2 weeks. And I suppose the one thing I did during the holidays was I emailed, Century is very good at making sure that I'm up to date with how many nuggets have been answered and things. So I sent that away in the middle of the holidays, say to parents, look how well this is going. So, and I will be checking and I will be writing to you after the summer holidays, the Easter holidays, which I did. I then wrote to each student or each parent and told them what their usage was. And I then also wrote to the top 25%, gave them a merit point, and the top 20, I gave them 3 merit points and emailed home as well. So then that momentum got there, and students could see that I was checking and they were being rewarded for it. And I'm sure being told off by their parents if they hadn't done as many hours as they should have done.
Of course. I think that's a really interesting way that you went about implementing Century, because it's almost, I guess, in a sense like a flipped model, because often when we speak to schools, it's about training up your teachers first and getting them really familiar with a new piece of technology, and then starting that rollout with students. So from your point of view, did you have any concerns about giving a new piece of technology out to students before teachers then got their hands on it?
The 3 heads of department got involved because they obviously decided on the curriculum that they wanted set in there. But I think it worked out much better this way around, because what I really liked about the training afterwards, when Charles gave the training to our staff, he was able to show how our students had done. And already seen the huge uptake in there. And I think when you've already launched the Microsoft platform, and then we were every week or so we were training people on a new application within Teams, it becomes a bit much for staff. And so I think it was really nice to have something to show and say, look, the students have really taken to this, and it's working very well. And it's, relatively easy to use and things, but it was a much smoother launch, I think, this way around.
Of course. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think a word that I've heard used so frequently now with schools is overwhelmed, staff being overwhelmed, during this period. And actually what you did by giving those logins to students was you took that pressure off the teachers. They had something to be doing over the Easter holidays. Parents were involved, you were rewarding accordingly for their work, but it did mean that teachers did get that little bit of a break away from having to go in and set all of that work. But the benefit was that they got all of that data when they came back. So I think that's really, really interesting way, and something sort of different that you've done with the launch of Century, but has paid off immensely. So it's great. Thinking about your staff then, how have you gone about supporting them? Because it is a stressful time for teachers. So what sort of systems have you put in place to support them?
Well, we continued with our Thursday afternoon training slots. So after school, we had an hour training. But before that, we had 2 buildings, and we would lose a lot of time by staff getting all together in one building. And now we could start 5 minutes after school finished, so staff didn't feel it was going on until 6 or 6:30. We always finished at 5:30, and we did something different every week. But we tried to make sure that it wasn't the same ICT technician, ICT literate or very advanced teachers saying things that most teachers would find quite hard to see themselves doing. So just really making sure that from word of mouth that we had actually a team where good practice was being shared, and staff who did struggle a bit and did find it difficult, I asked them, could you start the meeting for 10 minutes and just say how your experience has been, what have you learned from it? And it was very nice for staff to hear saying, oh, I really struggled with this. And class notebook was the big hurdle for us in Teams. And staff made mistakes, said, well, I haven't set it up properly, or this is what I'm going to do next. And the students really struggled for a while. And, all of those, honesty about the struggles, rather than just someone saying, wow, look, I can do this and let's all do that now, which we also had, but we had to balance it out a little bit with making it sort of realistic. And therefore we had all teachers really on board, even those who were a bit worried about class notebook at the beginning. Eventually, took a few weeks, but eventually took it on, because of course, as with anything, the students do grasp it very quickly. And once you've got your structure set, like in Century Tech, then the students just go with it. So.
And what kind of impact have you seen Century making then in those past couple of weeks that you've been using it?
Well, I think what the impact is really the sort of long-term vision that sort of our heads of department are keen to build this into their curriculum. That's how much they value there. I've done a survey with staff in terms of how would you value this as homework. So I think it's we do things really well as teachers, but some things artificial intelligence can do for us. And I really wanted to look at, well-being's been a big theme over the last few months, and trying to reduce workload for teachers, I think, by still coming up with really high quality feedback towards the teachers or the students. And I think the detail that Century offers in terms of the capitals, the commas, all of those things that sometimes are quite difficult for our teachers to mark in as much detail, especially English teachers, if they've got literature to mark, and then also have to look at all the spelling aspects. But if we can say, look, this can be done by this platform, and you can just see what you need to pick up in your lessons, I think that's a huge change really for our teachers, especially our English teachers who have got an incredible amount of marking to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And thinking about introducing something completely new, like what you've done in a short space of time, and I suppose the speed at which you've implemented those changes. Do you have any sort of tips and techniques that you could share with other school leaders in terms of getting those key people on on board, like you mentioned, your staff, but perhaps your parents? How would you suggest to others to go about doing that?
Well, yeah, I think there's a few key things that we just had in place. And I think the most important, and I'm eternally grateful to Mikkel, our head of IT, for sorting out the logins of our students. That is really absolutely crucial. We had many problems at the beginning. When they are able to change their passwords, you are setting yourself up for them completely forgetting them all the time. So we had set them up in a way that they could not change their passwords, and that all teachers had access to all of the passwords, so any of their teachers could help them if they'd forgotten. And after a few times of asking, that they remembered. So that was really important. And then I think it's setting up a help desk is really good, so you don't get all the emails directly sent to you or the head of IT or the IT technician. It goes to the help desk, and then you can also analyze patterns of things that people need help with. I think the other thing is doing regular surveys with parents, with students, and with teachers. And I think looking back, maybe I didn't do quite as many with teachers as I would have liked to. I did 2 or 3 over the period, but the students had almost weekly surveys, and the parents had 2 weekly surveys. So it was really good to gauge what was happening, and being able to share that back to staff, or share that back to parents, or whichever way around. But it's really useful for those 3 parties to hear from each other. And our parents had such nice comments that they put in there. I kept sharing them with staff every few days. I emailed all staff, and I just quoted 10 or 15 quotes to parents of the nice things. And I think that really helps to make them feel, well, it's worth, like you said, the feeling overwhelmed, working so hard, but it's having an impact. So I think that's really key. And then finally, the communication with staff and with parents. So just preparing staff and saying, well, next Thursday, in 5 days' time, we're going to look at this in our evening slot, so that they've got a bit of time to think about it. But also with our parents, just keep. I think it was at least 2 letters a week that we wrote during this time, just keeping them updated all the time, keeping them updated on their children's surveys, keeping them updated on what we were going to do next. And then with all the other complications of the grades and the rankings and all of those things. So there were constant communications going out. And I think that was really much appreciated, because in my first year, I think that before lockdown, I probably only wrote to parents 3 times, I think. And since then I've written, 12 or 15 letters. So I think that's something I've learned for not just for a lockdown period, but communication with parents is really, really key.
Absolutely. And I think what it sounds like, Jonathan, from listening to you speak, is that you've really kept that sense of community that a school should have. I think, when we've all got into lockdown, I think this is applicable in not just a school, in any context, that, sometimes we can feel perhaps more apart than ever, because although we all sit at computers all day long, keeping that sense of community and constant communication and bringing people along with you and the changes that you were making and implementing is key. So clearly you've done that through your surveys and letters, and just constant communication and feedback. So think that's really powerful and something that's really applicable, as you said.
It is, but you're right, the community is key, and the community is already here. So that's nothing I've had to work on. So our parents are incredibly supportive. They are very willing, you know, especially academically, they really want their students to progress. So they'll do whatever they need to do, more so than parents I've met before in my previous schools. Our staff, incredibly supportive, and we do have lovely children. So, you know, we even had a member of staff who joined us during lockdown for a temporary cover who'd never met the students and said, oh, they seem so lovely. You know, so that does help.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a testament for sure. And looking then, Jonathan, into next year, you know, new term, lots of people talking about maybe hybrid models of schools that, you know, some students coming on site, some being off. Do you have any sort of advice for other school leaders if they are looking to implement something new, maybe technology or otherwise, about how to go about it, you know, through your own experiences that you could dwell on?
Yeah, well, for me, it really boils down to four things. I think it's the passwords, the help desk, the communication with parents, and constant surveys. I mean, whatever you try and do, I think, you know, we're looking to move to one-to-one devices in September, and I've been telling parents about this for weeks now, even though we didn't have anything concrete yet. I kept warning them, this is coming, and then I did seminars last week with the parents, and I suppose really embracing technology. We've you know, there are things that we are going to continue doing, the parent meetings online instead of these parent evenings where we have queues of parents and teachers exhausted. That worked really well. And seminars, just inviting parents to join us from work and just have a quick, like here, 20, 25 minutes, you know, and then they don't need to travel to school, find a place to park, leave work early, you know, find someone to look after their children. All of those things are suddenly so much smoother and easier. So I think embracing those aspects of technology is really good. And just maybe one last thing on Century, what I found really useful in an international school is, first of all, that our students are mainly Spanish. So for them to continue with their learning throughout summer is absolutely crucial. But also our new joiners, many of our new joiners have not done GCSEs when they join us for A-level, or have not done Key Stage 3 when they join us for GCSEs. So we've given them access to Century Tech over the summer and explained, you know, I've given those parents seminars, shown them how it worked, and so that they feel a lot more confident, I think, and also more up to date with our curriculum when they join us in September. And I think that will have a huge impact as well. So for admissions for us in a growing school, that's been really good.
Great, that's wonderful. Yeah, so yes, a new exciting term ahead, and I think probably will look slightly different than other terms gone by. But yeah, brilliant to hear your insights, Jonathan, and yeah, thank you for sharing those with us. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's been a privilege to talk to you. For myself and the Century team, we've absolutely loved, you know, working with your school, and hopefully continuing to do so into the new year. So in the meantime, have a lovely summer. I hope you get a well-deserved break and have a good day. Thank you.